time for our final keynote now, closing the show with Neby Ejigu, Senior Partner Digital Transformation at Fin Partners. We're talking the age of predictive intelligence, anticipating the future of customer demand in manufacturing and mobility. Neby, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. It's been a fantastic show today. So many questions coming in from the audience, and you have the pleasure and the honour, I suppose, let's say, of closing the show today. So the virtual floor is yours, and I'll be back with some questions at the end.
Awesome, thank you for having me. All right, let's get started. The age of predictive intelligence. For a few of the sessions that I was able to see today, this was obviously a hot topic within the conversation. So, hi everybody, my name is Neby Ejigu. Let's see if my presentation can start. I am a senior partner at Fin Partners. It is a global communications and marketing firm, headquartered in New York, but global and around the world. I lead primarily our digital transformation efforts. That is working with our clients to think through both their marketing stack as well as their enterprise systems to help sort of solve for that unified data problem that everyone is talking about, right? And I've had the pleasure of working across different industries. So what I wanted to do today was talk about predictive intelligence and its use with AI in a rather more practical sort of manner. And, you know, over the past few months, I've been on a couple of panels, but I've also attended a lot of these things. And the one thing that keeps coming up is sort of this anticipation of the future, right? And I think that's where the hype around it needs a little bit of a reality check, which is if there's anything we can predict, it's how bad we are predicting the future when it comes to technology or major evolutions, as we'll see. So the idea here is, what can we do today? What are the things that we could do to help lift sort of the heavy load? How can we work faster? How can we work smarter? So it's not this end goal, we need to get their destination, but rather a journey that we need to get to. And not to get into a history lesson, and for those of you that this is a shameless book plug for Yuval Harari, but he has a book out now called Nexus, and it's an incredible book that talks about sort of the age of information, sort of the transitions. And when you think about the speed and the various numbers we put around Web 1.0, Web 2.0, Industry 4.0, the speed at which we get there is often lost on us, and more importantly, how quickly we adapt is also something that we tend to forget. You know, going from steam power to sort of the age of electricity and what that did to our communications and our efforts, to automation, computers and robots in terms of just like mass production and what that did for, you know, the world and every aspect of it, and what personalization and what globalization meant at that point, to where a lot of us are today, right? And what's interesting about this age of 4.0 is, you know, you hear the term, and you heard the term IoT a ton of times. Like it was literally the main thing to talk about maybe 6-7 years ago, right? Today, IoT is almost sort of a no-brainer. Like everything is connected, right? We look at it and pass sort of that idea of it being IoT to why isn't it IoT? And so you have a lot of organizations that are currently in the midst of going through their own transformation, either as a result of global events that have expedited it. For us, a lot of our clients happen to either be in 3 stages. They've never thought about it. It's not yet to happen, or we've been kind of ready. We've just found a reason to expedite, and we are at the cusp of expediting it, but now we have more of a reason to do it. And clearly, elements and global events like the pandemic was a huge sort of boost. But something else is a little different now, where there were so much gap in sort of the changes in these in this industry revolutions, or whatever numbers that you want to call, from like 2.0 to 3, from 3 to 4. Today, we're at the precedent of seeing both 4 and 5 happening, right? And what that is, it sort of speaks to the volume at which the speed and scale of these transformations are happening. When you're thinking IoT and big data and cybersecurity, and now, you know, the implementation of basic elements of AI, now you're starting to get into sort of advanced AI. We're talking about millions of dollars of research that has been poured into creating what we're calling digital twins. I'm sure most of you have already been talking about that today. The idea of testing out scenarios without having to, see it in life, and being able to play it out with a lot of data. And so Part of it is that it is not hype, right? It is not let's look into the future to think where this technology is. It's happening as we speak, right? We see it with AI powered factories. Some amazing things are happening there. You're seeing transformation leaders who have been at the forefront of some small elements, whether it's GE or Siemens, that are already doing some innovative things that are actually shaping what this means, both from a product manufacturing side, from a supply chain side. And they're starting to disrupt a few of these elements that are already transforming on their own at a much faster pace. The business models today require you to have elements of integration like predictive analytics as a key ingredient in business outputs. It was never a thing a couple of years ago, right? Now, the kind of forecasting that we're talking about is not your age-old sort of business forecasting based on it, but the same principles at a much faster pace, and it's completely transformed the way we think about what operationalizing and scaling is. Anticipating demand, we're much more accurate at it, right? Now, there is a much more connected tissue to that. And obviously, this notion of proactive issue resolution is an important one. If anything, that the pandemic at the large global scale has shown the manufacturing industry actually is this idea of this resilient systems and being able to know that what you think that you had was never enough. So where do you even begin to start? So for us, from a lot of our clients, when we start thinking about foundations of predictive analytics as the core aspect of AI that I want to talk about today in its transformative state, even at the basis of things, social listening and sentiment analysis have been an important part of how we can start connecting the dots with what our end goal customers are, as well as what we are feeling could be a potential sort of transformation for what we do as a result of it. So in B2B, there's a much closer connection now, right? It is no longer immediately diving into focusing on what our customers need, but now we are at that age of understanding what our customers want, right? And so even just through the lens of something as social listening and sentiment analysis that has been changing, the power of those insights is remarkable, right? We are at the age of early market signals. We can see sort of indicators of market shifts. We can start thinking about strategic product alignment, like actual shifts are happening in what we produce, how we produce, and we'll show some examples of that. Enhanced forecasting, there's much more accuracy to it. And obviously there's a competitive advantage to all of this too, right? Finding that white space and seeing where demand for something is not being met and that immediate sort of entry point to market so you can put yourself in position, both from a brand perspective, but as a product manufacturer as well, to be able to solve a problem that has yet to be solved, right? So, these are solutions and things that have already been in play. And you see, examples like Bosch with some of the basic sort of foundational feedback that they were getting from vehicle owners as well as manufacturers. There was this huge sort of push and understanding about more efficient, more silent braking systems. It literally was a product line for them. You have Danfoss out in Denmark, who really took this sort of notion of what it means to think about sustainability in manufacturing, but looking at it in so many angles of both sentiment and social listening to kind of think about standards that they want to create, and not only putting that out as the forefront of their brand, but also now aligning better with their clients who want to be aligned with a industry leader in sustainability and how they think about manufacturing. Avery Dennison, making these sort of labels across the world in different sort of products has been innovative, right? But part of that innovation has now also been speeded up because the industry is transforming into thinking about labels now that are part of automation. So now their clients themselves are also in the midst of transformation, right? And understanding what that means from just a collective data set of hearing what the customer demand is has helped them come up with innovative label technologies that work well with the sort of changing rapid pace of their own clients. So what does that mean? I mean, this is not new to some of you, right? But I think one thing to understand is you've always had predictive analytics, primarily, in the 1950s, everything was associated with things like the stock market or, food shortages and things like that, using core elements of what you're seeing as demand, output, and sort of the gaps in between. Well, this is a reactive state. We get information, we act on it based on what we feel is going to happen, but most likely it's all data of things that have happened, right? There's so many anomalies and there's so many sort of variables that would change that. Now, predictive state, and what we're really talking about here in the implication of AI, is that same formula layered on with better data and algorithms that are able and workflows that are able to do this in a way where it's collecting core information. And from a industry perspective, the formula of sentiment, the formula of social listening, and gathering metadata like that to start thinking about human behavior, customer interactions, journey shifts, geopolitical concerns that are happening, and how that might impact it is a phenomenal place to be in, right? And you see these stories, and it's happening in so many aspects of it today. Again, I listened into a few of the panels, and you start hearing things about some really amazing cases within sort of the predictive intelligence side. There's been a lot of focus about like how you can start thinking about this precise and preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance aspect of it, right? We're talking about millions of dollars being saved, and these are not elements in our current state that are far-fetched. The implication of actually doing this right and leveraging this kind of technology, the payout is massive, right? It isn't a ROI that you need to prove years and years. It's almost immediate in the sense of how fast it could be implemented. Now, how you implement it is another story, right? And I think this is where, from the perspective of the advisory side of things to a lot of our clients, it's really thinking about how you're set up and what the impact should be. And just a little bit about those impacts. When you think about 50% reduced downtime and maintenance costs, right? These are a couple of studies from different places, but downtime by 30 to 50%, that's massive, right? Improving your productivity and quality by 25%. This is an average span taken over 2 years of data for organizations that have implemented these. Optimizing your inventory and your demand for forecasting, right? And this is really just thinking about how you can lower your supply chain. 15%, that's massive for a lot of you. You understand how much of your market share and your budget goes towards that. Then sort of enhanced worker safety and efficiency is usually the entry point for a lot of organizations, but that's 40%. That's massive. And then thinking about your predictive maintenance and fleet management, for those of you that also have to go a little beyond sort of the supply chain piece, but are also thinking about mobility, there are so many scenarios. There's enough proof point for organizations to say, yeah, this is a no-brainer. We should do it, right? But that's where like you start thinking about sentiment from the people and what and why they want to do it. So at Fin, we do this B2B survey in 2024. We did one where we targeted 800 key decision makers across various industrial sectors, C-suite, all sort of the key players. And all this is proving is that we are also aware of these same changes that we're talking about, and there's an interest in it. So what are the things we find important? Well, sensor and monitoring technologies, these cocktail conversations with other colleagues across different sort of companies, you're starting to see the importance of those, right? In the US, the skill set around machinists is a workforce issue that we're trying to solve for. It is a big problem. I would imagine it is the same across different countries as well. But now you're sort of adding a layer where you have manufacturers who are, in some cases, even building their own specific like machines, production machines, are now using third-party sensor equipment to start doing something these machines have never done before. Communicate output to third-party systems so that there's middleware that connects it to something else that has information so we could take action. So implementation of sense and monitoring technologies is huge. Worker safety, as important as it is, they're thinking about it from the sense of automation. They're thinking about sustainable manufacturing, as you'd imagine, but a lot of these things start touching on the premise of, is there something out there that can expedite, automate, create workflows, somewhat leverage AI? But if you also ask, what challenges do you think should take priority? It's the technological disruption. This really does go back to that psyche, right? There is this fear that if I don't play catch up, I will be left behind. It is irrational. It is a normal sort of thing to fear because we've seen some of those elements in the dot-com era as well. But I think what often gets misrepresented here is that technological disruption doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get started as a result of what somebody else is doing. I think you have to look internally. And a lot of the key takeaways from a lot of the conversations here today is really thinking through where do you start and what are the small steps you take to get there. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. If anybody wants to take a look at this really full detailed report, there's a QR code here for you as well to view it. So what is the preparation stage, right? And everyone has kind of talked about that. Everyone hates this, the idea for clean data, because the larger the organizations that we've worked with across the board, the more segmented and the more fragmented their data is. And it's unbelievable how their data hygiene is nowhere near the core standards that it should be. So that idea of clean data is an important piece. There are different regulations, different organizations do it the same way, but the core principle remains the same. Integration across systems. This is where you're trying to end that fragmentation, but really thinking about what systems across your enterprise do you have. Really understanding what the challenges of fragmentation are. Proprietary systems are starting to phase out. They're starting to get replaced by more larger big tech solutions, right? You're starting to use your Oracles, your SAPs. You're starting to look at really nimble cloud-based infrastructures with AWS or Google, whatever it is, but they have their own fundamental framework. So it's also important to understand why was your data fragmented in this first place, because that's usually a sense of business units, operating channels, and there's been no need, right, to gather data from one party to the other. Unified ecosystem requirements is actually very much tied to all of this. And then thinking about the partners that you want to, and I don't mean just, implementation partners take a couple of levels. There is your enterprise partner that you would use. These are your cloud-based systems, but there's also your partner that would probably help you think through the strategic steps in being able to integrate. And then preparing your data for AI. And you may think, isn't that the same thing as sort of clean data? No, this is really just understanding why. Why are you really doing this, right? What is the business problem that you want to solve, right? And I think most of the time, starting with the problem and then seeing if there's a solution in which you can solve it efficiently has been the smoothest, most practical application of what we've seen clients in these fields being able to do. And then establishing data ownership and roles. I don't think this was emphasized enough, and I'll keep emphasizing this. This is also very important. It is a combination of upskilling. It is a combination of making sure that you're within your standards of things like data governance structures. But it is also really about thinking about what are the new roles? Who are the new people my organization needs to hire in order to help lead these efforts? In some practical way, when you're thinking about who needs to be in the room, and there could be a lot more, but this is just sort of key takeaways from lots of transformation projects we've helped. You need a data lead. This is somebody that keeps your information flowing frequently. You need your IT team, that security specialist involved within that part. You need an operations champion. This is something that without you are going to spend a lot of time just sort of getting feedback and aggregating everybody from that standpoint. And the operations champion can be across different teams. So can your change management advocate, right? And they should be. And what I mean by teams, typically, you have your customer service, your marketing, your sales, you have your folks on the ground, you have other folks, including nowadays HR, that's really looking at like a resilient workforce and understanding the feedback flow that's coming from the ground, right? And how is that applying both from an internal sort of perspective, but how's that also applying and when you mix it and mash it with external data, right? And so these are at a very core level, like the people that need to be in the room, even as you're starting to think about these elements. And we're not really talking about AI in sort of that large standpoint. Again, this is very specific to how can I leverage and start using things like predictive AI with thousands of tools that will let you do it. But it all really begins with what can you do on your end to be ready for the tools. And so that's what this is really about. So very simplified, it's sort of that preparation by organizing your team, being able to think about the project as a pilot that you can measure. And it is incredible because when you see pilot and measure, it's usually you think of it from a product standpoint and you're not really looking for you're not looking for major results. You're looking for enough indicators so that you can scale, right? What we've seen is those pilots are doing a little bit more than that. They are transforming in their small bubble, right? And so the scaling is really a full transformation at that stage. So pilot and measure should also be taken sort of as a serious go-to-market approach. And what you see is because it's changing so fast, that iteration and the scaling and the people that you need to include in that process are going to be just as important. So all this to say is that like connecting your data and building the right tech stack is really like digging into a deep tunnel full of the potential of how you can leverage your AI, right? And your predictive analytics. Data hygiene and all of these things that we're talking about are elements where a lot of it is really as a result of archaic data. I think if it wasn't for regulations around, data regulations in Europe, CCPS here, you would not have found the amount of information that has just been sitting in most organizations, right? And from our perspective, one of the things that we've identified is also just how disconnected the data organizations collect versus how and what that data is doing. Is it useful in any capacity? And when you collect enough data, and when you are investing in all these enterprise systems, we've also found that a lot of organizations spend about 2% of the functionality of these really large enterprise systems than what they're really meant to do. So even the enterprise system and how it's implemented in your own organizations are not factoring a couple of things. And so when you think about how do you overcome that sort of paralysis, immediately saying, oh my God, this is all fun, this is all great, I would love to get there, but where do I even start, right? And every organization has those sort of challenges. You can kind of be in this paralysis state. So one is, this isn't just a feel-good moment when I talk about emphasize the human element. It is a clear starting point. It is understanding what your organization is capable of doing with the skill sets it has. Who are the people and how is this thing going to impact their day-to-day? Again, thinking about practical ways in which you can make their lives easier, right? How do you dispel the myth of AI as a distant? It's not. Stop thinking about it and stop rushing into it because you feel it is the future of things. Do it based on highlighting that problem that is emphasized by the human element, and then start applying practical applications to it. By doing that, you also have to create a change in the way you treat your data. It is no longer the thing that you could use or can manipulate when you want to. It is literally this idea of being obsessed with how clean your data is. Everyone across your major enterprise system needs to understand the importance of this, right? Because it becomes the bread and butter of how efficient and the fuel of how efficient your systems down the road are. And so it starts now, right? And the cleaner your data is, and the more time you spend on point number 3, the faster it is for you to actually scale and start these projects internally. So start simple, scale smart. I've heard the same exact phrasing today as well. It is true. The one thing that I'd like to point out is this: as overwhelming as it is, and as soon as you see competitors doing it and you're thinking about it's because they're bigger or anything else, the power of these technologies is it's also bringing some level of equity, right? It doesn't take the kind of effort it did 10 years ago to be at the position that you need to be. So for example, scaling into a system and creating these sort of systems is a lot faster today. And the catch-up phase in which you can get to where maybe you aspire to be is a lot shorter, right? So don't worry about anything more than making sure that the foundational elements of where you start, if that takes time, let it take time, because that catching up process and the longevity and adoption of your systems is going to be the reward that you're looking for. It is hard to do all of this in 15 minutes, so I hope this was somewhat helpful to folks who are thinking about scaling.
Neby, thank you so much. You fitted so much into that time, and it rounded up beautifully so many aspects we've discussed on the manufacturing front over the course of today. So thank you for that. One question for myself, just to close things if I can, and that's about looking to future-proof yourself, because the speed that this technology and the capabilities is astonishing, and people are wanting to put things in place, but try and future-proof themselves. They don't want to put all their eggs into one basket now and find themselves, they've Look, I'm mixing my metaphors. It's the end of the show. They're back in the wrong horse, which is carrying some eggs. I don't know. Leave me to it. How do you go about future-proofing yourself as much as possible? Is it down to the data and the data hygiene and making sure that's in place? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. The data hygiene has to be like a organizational belief system, right? So that's like there's no ifs or buts. I think that culture has to change. But in terms of future proofing yourself post that is really trying to continuously now leverage data and things like workflows and automation as a way to get to the solution, right? Not as the solution, but how are you leveraging these key things? And that immediately starts getting organizations to start thinking about the practical applications of that clean data, right? At the same time, I think that you should think about upskilling people across the whole entire enterprise at different tiers, right? Because when the quality of your data is also the quality of the input of your data, right? When you think about ethical AI and all of these things, it's really like who is entering that data. And so I think it's also getting the quality of that data started. And I think what ends up happening is you're investing in good enough enterprise systems that is leveraging really high quality data, you're scaling, and the ability for you to future proof yourself is a little tighter there.
Neby, thank you very much indeed. That's a wonderful place to round up the show today. Really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you for humouring me when I mixed up more metaphors than have ever been done before in one link. It's the end of the show.
Late, I get it.
It's late for me. Neby, thank you so much for joining us here at Manufacturing and Mobility.
Thank you.
Live. Okay,
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Neby. That's us finished here at Manufacturing.